Hey Franco, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we released polling data from Leger, and it's all about the size and cost and function of our favorite thing, the swamp, the bureaucracy there in Ottawa. Where do you want to start with this? Like, how big and how gross and how expensive is our bureaucracy, and what are people thinking about it?
It's big, it's expensive, and it's gross, and people are fed up. There, that's the show, folks. No, look, I mean,
Bye.
look, like, look, the federal government has added 99,000 extra government bureaucrats since 2016. So you're paying for 99,000 more federal paper pushers today than you were in 2016. 99,000. But it's not just the size of the bureaucracy, right? You're not just paying for a bigger bureaucracy, you're paying for a bigger bureaucracy taking bigger paychecks because the cost has exploded. Okay, so in 2016, the federal bureaucracy cost taxpayers $40.2 billion. In 2024, last year, the federal bureaucracy cost taxpayers $71.2 billion. Okay, so in less than a decade, the cost of the federal bureaucracy has gone up 77%. Okay, so think about it this way, right? Not only did the federal government add 99,000 extra bureaucrats since 2016, they ballooned the cost to you, dear taxpayer, of the bureaucracy by 77%.
That is just disgusting. I was
Gross.
sitting there doing quick math this morning, and the baseline cost for our MP's salary, okay, not counting cabinet ministers, just MP's salary, costs around 70 million with an M. You look at the bureaucracy, it's more than 70 billion. Like, it is mind blowing. So, what are people saying about this? So, we asked the question through Leger. Are people as upset about this as we are?
Yeah, no, look, people, the poll shows, right? The poll shows that Canadians know that they're paying for too many federal paper pushers and they want the government to cut the size and cost of the bureaucracy. So let me read you the numbers, right? So the result of the poll, what should happen to the size and cost of the federal bureaucracy? 54, more than half, 54% say reduce. Only 4% say increase. So, like, it's got to be even some federal bureaucrats that are saying, yeah, no, we should probably cut here. Okay. So 54% say reduce, 24% say maintain, just 4% say increase, 17% said don't know. Okay. So if you remove those who are undecided on the issue, take away those don't knows, then 66% of Canadians want to reduce the size and cost of the federal bureaucracy. So look, like, clearly Canadians are like, yeah, there's way too many federal bureaucrats and the government must cut the bureaucracy. And look, Canadians would be right. Look, so Mark Carney, right, in the last election, now Prime Minister, he said he's going to balance this operating budget. Now, we're not going to go into the details of how the government is going to split this budget into that budget, but let's just look at the numbers. The federal bureaucracy consumes more than half of the operating budget, more than half. So for Carney to actually cut taxes and to balance this operating budget, he has no choice. He has to cut the number and the cost of the federal bureaucracy.
Do you think he's going to? I'm sorry to get you to speculate, but I keep on pinning my hopes on this dude because he's got like his PhD from Oxford in economics or something. Like, he's no slouch, former governor, Bank of Canada. So we're not asking him to do like crazy math here. Do you think he's actually going to he's going to actually pull the trigger and make these cuts? Like, he's at the end of his math here, right? So is he actually going to pull the trigger and do it?
Well, look, I don't know. I can't know for sure, but here's what I do know, okay, is like, look, the number one threat to a government employee's paycheck is not political ideology. It's not even the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, right? It is the interest charges on the debt. Okay, that's what it is. It's the interest charges on the debt, right? So, like, look, to understand this lesson, let's go back in time to the 1990s in Saskatchewan under an NDP government. Okay, so the interest charges and the deficits and the debt got so out of control in Saskatchewan that, like, they had to close 50 hospitals across the province.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, look, either the Carney government or the federal government more broadly, either it makes some tough decisions today or tougher decisions are going to be forced on those federal politicians tomorrow. OK, because the interest charges on the debt are getting out of control. Right. Interest charges are costing taxpayers more than $1 billion every single week. Well, what's $1 billion? $1 billion is a brand new hospital, right? So essentially, every week, Canadians are losing out on a brand new hospital because the government is wasting so much money on interest on the debt. Or let's think about it this way, okay? So last year, the federal government spent $54 billion on debt interest charges. That's more money than what the federal government sent to the provinces in healthcare transfers. In fact, it's more money than what the government collected through its sales tax, the GST. So if we didn't have all this debt, think about what you could do. You could either double healthcare transfers or completely eliminate the GST. So you ask me, what is the government going to do? Look, I don't have a crystal ball, right? A lot of it depends on some outside pressure from groups like the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and our supporters. But at the end of the day, like, these interest charges are spiraling out of control, and either the government makes some tough decisions today or massively tough decisions are going to be forced on the government tomorrow.
Lastly, you mentioned healthcare as an example, which is a great visualization. It's actually pretty harsh, but it's true. Is there other elements of this poll? Like, there's always this question of how much are we spending, how big is the government, but what are we getting in return? Are Canadians thrilled with the return on investment, with the services that they're getting in exchange for their money?
Well, what do I always say, right? I always say the most important question you got to ask yourself is, are you getting 77% better services from the federal bureaucracy, right? Because the cost of the federal bureaucracy has gone up 77% since 2016. And I always say, well, I think that the answer to that question is a big fat no. Turns out the answer to that question is a big fat no. Okay, so the Leger also asked Canadians, the government added 99,000 extra bureaucrats. The cost of the bureaucracy has gone up more than 70% since 2016. Do you think federal services have kept pace with the size and growth of the bureaucracy? And stay with me, folks, because it actually is crazy. 50% said no, services are getting worse. So 50% say no, services are getting worse than what they were in 2016.
Okay.
23% said services are about the same as 2016. Only 11% said services are better. So the bureaucracy has gone up by 77%, the cost, and only 11% said services are better. But hold on a second, because within that 11%, 9% say, yeah, services have improved, but still should be better. So even among the people who are like, yeah, services are better, even among that group, which is already small, people are still like, yeah, services should still be better, right? Only 2% said federal services are much better than 2016. Only 2%. A total of 16% didn't know. So, it's pretty clear to me, you remove the undecideds, and 60% of Canadians say federal services have gotten worse since 2016. So, ask yourself the question, are you getting 77% better services than the federal bureaucracy? The poll clearly shows that Canadians are saying no. So, Canadians know they're paying for too many federal bureaucrats, want the government to cut the size and cost of the federal bureaucracy, and are clearly saying that adding more bureaucrats doesn't mean better services.
Okay. And again, just to do a visualization, folks, think back 10 years ago. Put yourself back to 2015. Remember how much you were paying in taxes. Remember what expenses were like at the federal government and what services were like. Are you getting, 77% better services from that same federal government now? I think that's a laughable question because the answer is heck no, coming from this end of the things. All right, Franco, how do we fight this? How does the average person who's listening to this right now, who is totally slammed with taxes, who's trying to keep their head above water, who thinks politicians aren't bloody listening, how do they actually fight this mess?
Well, head over to taxpayer.com. Right? Become and join the tax fighter army. Look, we've got so many different petitions online. I'm just looking at one of my favorite ones right now. And I think very good one to sign right now is shrink the federal bureaucracy. So taxpayer.com, sign the petition, shrink the federal bureaucracy. I think that one's really important because, look, the debt is out of control. $1 billion every week in debt interest charges. And a huge reason that the debt is out of control is because the bureaucracy is out of control, right? The government added 99,000 extra bureaucrats. The government increased the cost of the bureaucracy 77%. Well, guess what, folks? The government is broke and taxpayers can't afford to pay for this bloated bureaucracy here in Ottawa.
You heard the man, folks. Head on over to taxpayer.com. The government is eating your wallet. Time to put it on a diet.
Well said. The government is... what did you say? That's so good. I'm still recording, but sorry, Grant, maybe don't include this, maybe do. I don't know.
The government is eating your wallet. Time to put it on a diet.
The government is eating your wallet. Time to put it on a diet. Love it. I don't know. Maybe leave it in, maybe don't. Bye.
Okay, bye.